pre-construct archaeology. The excavation was carried out during an 8-week period in the summer of 2020.
We can't hear anymore, Nigel.
Like, I daren't move my mouse when we're running this again, so I'm going to stop share and restart, folks. What we're finding is these shows want to stop if I allow them to.
The site is located to the south of Lown Street and to the west of Boreal High Street, and approximately 800 meters to the south of the Thames. The excavation trench covered the northeast quadrant of the site and measured about 425 square meters. This slide shows the topography of Southwark during the early Roman period. Around AD 50, Southwark was a low-lying expanse of riverine islands interspersed with braided channels, which were inundated at high tide. Two of these islands, commonly known in the archaeological literature as the North and South Islands, represent the more settled and urban areas of Roman Southwark, which developed alongside Road 1. The Great Suffolk Street site is separated from the South Island by Boreal Channel. This area has been previously excavated in different locations and contribute to our understanding of the area as burial ground during the Roman period. This area, this burial ground is known in the archaeological literature as South Cemetery. Evidence for this has been found at different locations, for example at Great Dover Street, where a total of 25 inhumation and 5 cremation were found inside a walled cemetery together with a mausoleum alongside a Roman road, which was identified as Watling Street. At Trinity Street, 44 inhumation and 2 cremation were recorded. At Dickens Square, 4 inhumation, 1 cremation were recorded. At Lown Street, which is located to the northwest of Great Dover Street site, 84 inhumation, 2 cremation were recorded. And finally, at Harbour Road, where a mausoleum together with a stone sarcophagus were found to the west of Roman Road, which has been identified as part of Stein Street. Also, Romano-Celtic religious temple complex of Empire Square, formerly known as Tabor Square, and ritual practice also was recorded at Swan Street, where disarticulated human remains were found within Roman ditches, and 1 inhumation was found inside a Roman timber well. The earliest burials were found in the southwest corner of the site, and mostly follow a northeast-southwest orientation. To the north, an east-west orientated ditch represents a boundary ditch. One burial only, it doesn't conform with this first plot, and is burial 6, which is isolated and located in the southeast corner of the site. During the late 1st century and early 2nd century, the cemetery continued to develop. In the west central part of the site, burial plot 2 follow the same kind of northeast southwest orientation, and is well defined in its shape. To the north, another plot is called burial plot 3. Is mostly a mix of inhumation and cremation, and is defined to the east by ditch 2, which follow a northeast-southwest orientation. This particular plot 3, seemed to actually extend to the north, beyond the north limit of excavation of the trench. During the 2nd century, northwest to southeast ditch 3 is constructed. This ditch kind of separate the activity, possibly the activity in Great Salford Street site from the activity to the north, which is more related probably to the Land Street Cemetery. Um, Again, the burials follow uh, mm, a northeast southwest orientation also here, and they kind of dated to the 2nd century, as I said before. During the second half of the 3rd century, ditch 3 silted up, and backfill is in turn truncated by a sequence of grave cuts. Grave cuts follow the same orientation of the ditch, and seems to be part of a plot which possibly extend to the beyond the north limit of excavation of the site. Seems to be like more like the result of an encroachment of this Boreal plot 5 to the south, to the very limit of this Boreal plot, which was represented by ditch 3, basically. Finally, during the late 3rd to 4th century AD, all the space left between the previous burial plot are basically used to actually to insert new graves. So it resulted with the full extent of the western part of the site completely covered with graves. The interesting thing is that there is a very little kind of a truncation, and when in terms of intercutting grave cuts, but when there are truncations, it seems to actually be a deliberate action, possibly associated with an attempt to actually be associated with particular graves, probably family members or other. Now we're gonna have a close look at individual burials. We start with burial 6, which, as I said before, is it was an isolated burial located in the south east corner of the site. It doesn't come from within the plot. We will look at later, and this is a middle adult, possibly female. It's a position in the encroached position, probably with her hands tied up behind the back, but I'm not sure about this. Now, the possibility is also that this burial belonged to another plot, another burial plot, which extend behind the southern limit of excavation. Now we're going to have a look at some of the burial from plot 1. This one represents a mid-old age, possibly female individual. There are clear evidence of chalk, which were probably contained within a coffin, as 9 iron nails from the coffin were recovered from the graves. So it seems that this individual was placed into a wooden coffin, and then a layer of crushed chalk was laid on top of the individual in order to actually to preserve the body for longer. Okay, now we move to burial plot 2. Here we got two interesting innovation. One represented by burial 19, which represents an adult male, and by burial 20, which is represent a juvenile individual. Now, the interesting thing is that the stratigraphic relationship between the two burial show that the juvenile individual was buried after the adult male was buried. The other consideration we had to make about these two individuals is that burial 19 was probably inside a coffin, as is shown by and nail be located alongside the grave cut. But also, this is suggested also by the fact that the individual was still in a preserved coffin when the juvenile was actually interred into his grave cut. So there was no truncation on the feet of the adult, and this has actually led to the conclusion that possibly the adult male and the juvenile were related. And so the adult male died first, and then was followed uh, um, sometime later by his son or by some family member. Uh, Two other very interesting burials from plot 2 are represented by middle-aged individual and adolescent adult, possibly female individual. The middle-aged individual is located in to the east of the plot, and it seems that it was decapitated. His head was placed in the bed, in the grave, and the rest of the corpse was rolled into the grave and ended up in a kind of on his sides. The position of the hand the hand seems to be tied up on the back, and a similar fate happened to the female individual, which is in this case the skull was placed next to the left leg. Now, it's unclear if the decapitation was the cause of the death of the individual, or if this was carried out post-mortem. So, but one is kind of very interesting to see that two decapitation are next to each other. So there is definitely some connection between the two individuals. Now we move to plot 3. Here we have, as we said before, a combination of inhumation and cremation. Two photographs show two of the cremation found in this particular plot. We go cremation on the left hand side, cremation from group 67, which has clearly been damaged by later activity, which is associated with post-medieval agricultural activity. Whilst the other cremation is even if damage is still intact. So we have like the nearly complete vessel here, which represent a Verulamium region whiteware butt beaker containing exactly cremation. Also, within burial plot 3, we go a sequence of intercutting cuts, which resulted in the uncovering of a skull, dish, and a cremation. They are all located in the north part of the site. Now we move to the to burial plot 4, in particular to burial 38, which represent a juvenile adolescent individual. The interesting thing about this particular burial is that jet beads, which are possibly part of a bracelet, were found next to the left arm of this individual. These jet beads are very nicely worked, and they formed a very nice object accompanying the deceased. Now we're moving to the late 3rd to 4th century. In particular, we talk about like burial 54. Is an adult. This is an adult individual, and the interesting thing is that there is an accessory vessel in a grave, placed on the left side of the head. The vessel is a Nene Valley beaker with painted floral scrolls, which was dated to AD 250 and later. Another interesting burial from the late 3rd to 4th century is the one which contained an adult male and combined different burial practice. Here there are inhumation, cremation, and reburying of disarticulated human remains. The cremation was placed inside a near-completely Verulamium region of white ware, naked jar dated to the late 1st to early 2nd century, whilst the Annalise Old Farmhand ware ring-neck flagon with burnished decoration dated AD to 7420 also is placed next to the head of the inhumation, which is they've been identified as an adult, possibly male individual. Another burial which quite interesting is the burial 1, where a dolphin handle glass bottle dated to the 3rd, early 4th century was found. This was also within these burials was also found the remain of a late alloy jug, which was dated to the 3rd century, early 4th century. Finally, a particular burial was lined with fragments of a dress or amphora dating to AD 7160. The stratigraphic position of the burial showed that it was a late 3rd to 4th century in date. But despite the early date of the amphora fragments, which suggests the amphora was in use for a long period until it was later used for the line of the grave. This particular practice has been extensively observed at Ile Rousse in Corsica, for example, where they were used to bury children. In a particular case for our site, also this particular grave contained a juvenile adolescent individual. Finally, I'd like to put the result of the excavation at Great Suffolk Street in the wider context. Starting from Harper Road, the Harper Road excavation, where we found the evidence for a Roman road, a Roman mausoleum, and a stone sarcophagus. The Roman road had been identified as part of a Staines Street. As a result, a new projection for the line of Staines Street are being proposed, which can be seen here on this particular slide. Here we can see the Great Suffolk Street site in relation to the road, together with the mausoleum and sarcophagus. We can see that they follow the same orientation of the road. In particular, we can see the northern boundary ditch we found Great Suffolk Street, and how he's the perpendicular to the line of Staines Street. To conclude my talk, I would like to give a thank you to all the field staff which undertook the excavation of Great Suffolk Street. Without them, this would have never been possible, and they did a fantastic job, especially considering the COVID-19 and weather condition. Thank you.
That was superb, Ireneo. What an absolutely fascinating site. The Southwark Roman cemeteries just continue to give, and there's some particularly fine deviant burials in there, which I think we'll all look forward to hearing more about when you are able to write it up. I think as we're on 20 past, we'll move straight on to Sian. And there's one question that's appeared, and perhaps Ireneo, if you can take a look in the chat box and perhaps
Yes.
answer some of the questions that come in, that would be fantastic. But I think we'll move on and hand over to Sian Anthony from AOC, who's going to speak about